J.R.R. Tolkien, 1892–1973, was an English writer, philologist, and academic best known for his high fantasy works, particularly The Hobbit, 1937, and The Lord of the Rings, 1954–1955. He is often regarded as the father of modern fantasy literature. Here's an overview of his life and works. Early life and education. Born January 3, 1892, in Bloemfontein, South Africa, to English parents. After his father died in 1896, his mother, Mabel, moved with Tolkien and his younger brother to Birmingham, England. Mabel passed away in 1904, and Tolkien was raised by a Catholic priest, Father Francis Xavier Morgan, who had a profound influence on his religious views. He excelled in languages from a young age, developing a passion for philology, the study of languages. He studied at Oxford University, where he specialized in Anglo-Saxon and Germanic languages. He was especially interested in ancient myths, languages, and literature. Academic career. After serving in World War I, where he experienced the horrors of trench warfare, Tolkien returned to academia. He worked on the Oxford English Dictionary and later became a professor at Oxford, teaching English language and literature. During his academic career, Tolkien contributed significantly to philological studies, particularly in Old English and Old Norse literature. Major works. 1. The Hobbit, 1937. Originally written as a children's story, The Hobbit introduced readers to Middle-earth and its rich mythology. It follows the journey of Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit who joins a group of dwarves on a quest to reclaim their homeland from the dragon Smaug. The novel was an immediate success and laid the foundation for Tolkien's larger world-building efforts in The Lord of the Rings. 2. The Lord of the Rings, 1954–1955. Originally conceived as a sequel to The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings evolved into a much larger and more complex work. It is a multi-part epic that explores themes of power, friendship, courage and sacrifice. The trilogy, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King, follows Frodo Baggins, a hobbit, as he embarks on a perilous quest to destroy the One Ring, a powerful object that corrupts those who seek to possess it. The series became one of the best-selling books of all time and cemented Tolkien's legacy as one of the most important fantasy writers in history. 3. The Silmarillion, published posthumously in 1977. This work contains the deep mythology and history of Middle-earth, covering the creation of the world and the early ages leading up to the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Although published after Tolkien's death, much of it was written during his lifetime. His son, Christopher Tolkien, edited and completed the work based on his father's notes. 4. Unfinished Tales and other works. After Tolkien's death, Christopher Tolkien edited and published several collections of his father's unfinished works, including Unfinished Tales, 1980, and The History of Middle-earth, 1983–1996, which provided further insights into the complex world Tolkien created. Beren and Luthien, 2017, and The Fall of Gandalin, 2018, were also published posthumously. Themes and style. Mythology and language. Tolkien's works are deeply rooted in mythology and linguistics. He invented multiple languages for the inhabitants of Middle-earth, such as Elvish, Quenya and Sindarin, and based much of the lore on Germanic, Norse, and Celtic mythology. Good versus evil. His stories often revolve around the conflict between good and evil, with a particular focus on the corrupting nature of power, exemplified by the One Ring. Catholic influence. As a devout Catholic, Tolkien's faith influenced many of the themes in his writing, particularly the idea of providence, sacrifice, and redemption. Nature versus industrialization. Tolkien was wary of modern technology and industrialization, which he saw as destructive forces, a theme reflected in the contrast between the idyllic Shire and the industrial wastelands of Mordor. Legacy. Tolkien is considered one of the greatest authors of the 20th century. His works have been adapted into multiple media, including Peter Jackson's highly successful film adaptations of The Lord of the Rings, 2001 to 2003, and The Hobbit, 2012 to 2014. He has inspired countless authors, and is credited with popularizing the modern fantasy genre. His deep world building and the creation of entire languages and cultures set a new standard for high fantasy. Death. Tolkien passed away on September 2, 1973, at the age of 81. He was buried beside his wife Edith, whom he deeply loved, and their gravestones are inscribed with the names Beren and Luthien, a reference to one of Tolkien's most cherished tales of star-crossed lovers. Tolkien's works continue to be celebrated for their imaginative depth, linguistic creativity, and timeless themes. J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, 1937, is a celebrated work of children's literature and one of the foundational texts in the fantasy genre. While it is often regarded as a lighter and more accessible prelude to The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit has considerable literary merit and depth in its own right. A critical analysis of the novel reveals themes of heroism, growth, and the interplay between adventure and domesticity, as well as its linguistic richness and mythological resonance. 1. Structure and narrative style. The Hobbit follows the traditional structure of the Bildungsroman, or a coming-of-age story. The protagonist, Bilbo Baggins, starts as a reluctant and somewhat timid character but grows into a courageous hero by the end of the story. Tolkien uses a third-person omniscient narrator with a whimsical, conversational tone. This narrator often addresses the reader directly, which creates an intimate storytelling style. For example, the narrator makes asides like "as you will see if you ever get a chance" or "I suppose you must be sitting quietly at home now," techniques that draw the reader into the story. The narrative is episodic, divided into distinct adventures, for example, trolls, goblins, spiders, Gollum, Smaug, each presenting different challenges that allow Bilbo to demonstrate increasing resourcefulness. This structure keeps the story engaging for younger readers, but also offers layers of complexity for older audiences, particularly in how each episode contributes to Bilbo's development. 2. Heroism and transformation. A central theme in The Hobbit is the transformation of Bilbo from a comfort-seeking, provincial hobbit into a brave and resourceful hero. His journey echoes the classic hero's journey or monomyth, as outlined by Joseph Campbell. Bilbo begins in the ordinary world of the Shire, is called to adventure by Gandalf, and embarks on a perilous journey that fundamentally changes him. Unlike traditional heroes who are warriors or kings, Bilbo is an everyman. His heroism is based on wit, cleverness, and morality rather than physical strength. For example, when he outsmarts Gollum in the game of riddles, his intelligence becomes his key asset. In contrast to the more traditional heroic figures like Thor in Oakenshield or Bard, Bilbo represents a new kind of heroism, one that is more accessible and relatable. By the end of the novel, Bilbo demonstrates not only physical courage, as seen in his dealings with Smaug, but also moral courage in his refusal to succumb to the greed that afflicts Thorin and others over the treasure of Erebor. This marks Bilbo's maturation, and the completion of his journey. 3. Themes of greed, power, and corruption. While The Hobbit is often viewed as a light-hearted adventure, it also explores darker themes, particularly the corrupting influence of greed and power. The treasure of Smaug symbolizes more than wealth, it represents the destructive potential of avarice. The dragon itself is a manifestation of greed, hoarding wealth but unable to use it, similar to how Thorin becomes obsessed with reclaiming his ancestral riches. Thorin's descent into madness over the Arkenstone, a symbol of his inheritance, mirrors the corruptive power of the One Ring in The Lord of the Rings. His inability to share the treasure with the people of Lake Town or even his own allies shows how wealth can breed isolation and moral decay. The Battle of Five Armies also serves as a commentary on how greed leads to conflict. Various groups, Dwarves, elves, men, and goblins fight over Smaug's treasure, illustrating how material desire can overshadow more important values like fellowship, peace, and justice. 4. The tension between domesticity and adventure. One of the central conflicts in The Hobbit is between Bilbo's desire for a quiet, comfortable life in the Shire and the adventurous world beyond. This tension is evident from the opening lines where Bilbo is introduced as a hobbit who enjoys the comforts of home, yet is unexpectedly swept into a grand adventure. Throughout the novel, Bilbo is torn between his longing for the safety of Bag End and the thrill of discovery. The Shire represents stability and contentment, while the wilderness represents risk, transformation, and danger. In this way, The Hobbit plays on the classic theme of the hero who must leave home in order to find himself, but it complicates this trope by suggesting that there is virtue in both adventure and domestic life. By the end of the novel, Bilbo has grown to appreciate the value of his journey but remains tied to the idea of home. His return to the Shire is bittersweet, as he no longer fully belongs in the peaceful world he left. He is a hero, but also an outsider, marked by his experiences. This tension reflects the larger theme of the reluctant hero, someone who seeks peace but is pulled toward adventure by fate. 5. Mythological and literary influences. Tolkien's deep knowledge of mythology and philology is evident throughout The Hobbit. The story draws heavily on Norse and Germanic mythological traditions. For example, the dwarves' names are taken directly from the Poetic Edda, a collection of Old Norse poems, and Smaug bears similarities to the dragon Fafnir from the Volsunga saga. The concept of the heroic quest, the treasure hoard, and the dragon as the guardian of wealth all have roots in ancient epics like Beowulf, which Tolkien studied extensively. Bilbo's role as a reluctant hero is similar to the protagonists of many older mythological tales who are initially hesitant to embrace their destinies. In addition to these mythological influences, Tolkien's world-building is shaped by his background in philology. He created entire languages and cultures for the peoples of Middle-earth, grounding the story in a world that feels rich and lived in. The Elvish languages, in particular, demonstrate Tolkien's linguistic creativity and contribute to the novel's immersive quality. 6. Tone and accessibility. The Hobbit is lighter in tone than The Lord of the Rings, often incorporating humor and whimsy, especially in its portrayal of Bilbo's initial discomfort with the grand adventure. The lighter tone makes it accessible to younger readers, but there are moments of real darkness, particularly in the portrayal of Smaug and the battle scenes toward the novel's conclusion. The transition in tone, from the playful early chapters to the more serious later ones, mirrors Bilbo's own journey from naivety to maturity. Tolkien balances these tonal shifts skillfully, using them to reflect the protagonist's growing awareness of the world's complexities. Conclusion. Tolkien's The Hobbit is much more than a simple children's adventure story. Its rich thematic exploration of heroism, greed, transformation, and the tension between home and adventure makes it a work of considerable depth. Tolkien's integration of mythological elements, his creation of an immersive world, and his ability to blend humor with seriousness ensure that The Hobbit appeals to readers of all ages and remains a cornerstone of modern fantasy literature. The novel's enduring legacy lies in its ability to entertain while also prompting reflection on timeless human experiences and moral dilemmas.